So, who would have thought that India would be leading the market, leading the world on adoption of solar? Well, apparently that's what's happening. Guys, my name is Sam Evans, and welcome to the Electric Singularity. Here, I like to share news with you about the world's transition over the next decade, as I believe it will only take a decade to full electrification and to full 100% renewable power use and generation. That's my prediction. 2030, electrification of the car will be complete, and by 2030, electrification, full renewable energy use will have completely supplanted use of coal and other fossil fuels. That's my prediction. Now to the article. Akshat Rathi from Bloomberg reports India is showing developing countries how to quickly transition to solar. The rise of Sumant Sinha's Renew Power has come in spite of the country's corruption, bureaucracy, and high capital costs. Now, the question is, why is there a rise of solar energy production in India? A huge rise when there's a lot of corruption in India. Well, I'll tell you why I think there is after the article. And I'm fairly confident I know the answer. 10 years ago, solar power barely existed in India. Now the country is adding more generation capacity from solar than coal. It's showing other sun-soaked developing countries how to rapidly deploy cleaner energy even in the face of corruption, red tape, and weak finances. Much of India's success in executing a tricky energy transition can be attributed to entrepreneurs such as Sumant Sinha. The 56-year-old is the chairman and managing director of Renew Power PVT Limited, the country's largest renewable energy developer. The rise of Renew came as India was wrestling with myriad problems, widespread corruption, a frustrating bureaucracy, and the high cost of capital. Now, India is still contending with those problems, widespread corruption, a frustrating bureaucracy, and the high cost of capital. That hasn't changed. When the company was founded in 2011, the country ranked 134th in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index, below China and Russia. And soon, there was another crisis. Between 2006 and 2008, banks had approved a flurry of loans to build new coal power plants based on the view that demand for electricity would surge in India. When demand didn't meet expectations years later, many coal power plants were forced to operate for fewer hours than planned, which dramatically increased the cost to that plant of operating. In fact, quite often, when coal plants don't meet their expected 85% generation, they cannot operate on, regardless of what they do, they cannot make a profit. Often, most coal power plants, unless they run at a minimum 70% capacity, cannot make a profit no matter what they do. Many coal power plants were forced to operate for fewer hours than planned, and the country's public sector banks were left with vast amounts of poor quality debt. That made it hard for companies such as Renew to raise money domestically, increasing the stakes for Sinha. I was basically putting all my life savings into this venture, he says. But he had the right kind of experience for the moment. Before Renew, Sinha was an investment banker in the US and later the chief operating officer of Indian wind turbine maker and renewable energy operator Suzlon Energy Limited. He understood right off the bat that renewables was as much a finance story as it was a technology story, says Kanika Chawla, Program Manager at United Nations Energy, which coordinates work on energy issues across various UN bodies. Chawla was previously with an environmental think tank that worked closely with Renew on energy and finance modeling. Sinha had to make two big moves to expand his company: tap international finance and secure domestic customers. Goldman Sachs Group Inc. had been looking for investments in an emerging market after completing a successful multi-billion-dollar exit from wind power in the US. In 2007, I disagree with this article. Goldman Sachs Group had been looking for investments in an emerging market after completing a successful multi-billion-dollar exit from wind power. If they exited from one of the world's largest emerging technologies, I wouldn't consider that a successful thing to do. In 2007, Sinha made a winning pitch to Goldman, which acquired the largest stake in Renew for $470 million, with investments starting in 2011. Goldman's confidence in the company helped Sinha raise funds from institutional investors in Canada, Japan, and the United Arab Emirates. While money was coming in from backers, Sinha had to ensure there would be domestic consumers to pay for Renew's clean power. in India's highly regulated electricity sector, the customers he found weren't households but state utilities. Just like the banks, these utilities were heavily indebted from years of mismanagement and poorly enforced regulations. And I would add, from coal. So Renew created teams around the country that would ensure utilities coughed up what they owed. That focus and determination helped Renew dominate the market, even as the competition grew. In February, it agreed to merge with blank check company RMG Acquisition Group 2 and list in the US at a valuation of $8 billion. Now, since then, India has been one of the leading countries in solar adoption, and they've had a number of tenders that they have released to the market where the average price for those tenders for solar was 2 cents per kilowatt hour. Coal is approximately 6 cents per kilowatt hour. So you can see that it mathematically makes 100% sense to invest in solar versus coal. In fact, it's cheaper to start a new solar plant than to continue operating an existing coal plant. I believe the Indian market is run by people, at least the energy market is run by people who are basing their decisions on sound finance, on mathematics, and on logic. And you've got to highly respect India for that. If people in charge are basing the decisions on those things, unlike the Australian economy, which is highly invested in coal and chooses intentionally to pay more for coal generation than what we could if we installed solar. I mean, we're a country similar to India. We have huge amounts of sun, but we choose not to because of politics. Fortunately, in India, politics, while corrupt, has still not prevented the country from transitioning very quickly to solar. And India, I believe, will continue to transition to solar at an incredibly rapid rate. Guys, thank you for watching the video. I look forward to bringing you more news about solar, wind, and electric cars in the future. Looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye-bye.